Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Story Studio podcast. Today, our guest is Vered. Is it Asai? I'm sorry, I never say the last name, so I don't even know.
Ehsani.
You'd think I'd know by now, but I never say your last name. I just see it written.
I avoid it at all costs.
If we were pros, then we could have done that question ahead of time, but I'm not thinking well today.
Yeah, but we like to shoot
It's
straight.
Vered,
right
like
here.
Madonna,
There you
like
go.
Elvis.
There's only one Barrett, so that's all you need to say.
Did you hear Vered was not happy, or not Vered? Sorry, did you hear Madonna was not happy with her her coverage in the New York Times piece that just came out?
Yeah, I don't care about Madonna.
Yeah,
Not a thing that I care about.
yeah, she bitched loudly about it. She said they weren't being fair to her.
All right, so we have a there you go. We have
There was a time when that would have got more play. Madonna's just no one cares about her anymore.
So why don't you intro us, John?
So Vered is
I like how you guys let me hang out there with the last name thing, though, just looking like an asshole. I like that. It just kind of went away. Nobody picked me up. Nobody resolved it. It's like, yeah, fuck you, Johnny.
Vered
What kind of wine do you
answered
want?
I tried, Johnny, but you just weren't paying attention. So what?
Yeah, she did. She answered you.
Oh, I thought you just chided me.
Totally tried. What did you
No,
talk
she
about?
answered you like immediately. So
Totally.
anyway, Vered, and I don't need to say her last name because
Because you don't know it.
It's Ehsani. Is that right? Is it Vered Ehsani?
That's awesome, Sean. Well
All
done.
right. Thank you.
Because he just heard it, apparently.
So anyway, Vered is old school Sterling and Stone family. She's been to, I don't know, I've lost count.
Well, she gets like 3 or 4 points for every one because she's crossing an ocean.
Yes, right. So
like if you came 3 times, you came 20 times.
yeah, how far is the flight? When you come to visit us in Austin, Vered, what does your route look like?
From Nairobi, Kenya.
And
So
how much
everybody
do
knows
you
that.
hate yourself to be on a plane that much?
It's fortunately, Dave, I somehow manage. So it's 24 hours from door to door. Yeah, joy. I know, Dave. I can see you just like trying to like exactly.
No, that's the
shooting
number of
yourself
hours
back.
in a day. You're misspeaking right now. I know that number, and it's hours in a day.
Okay, I have to tell you this, guys, because on the last signature event we had, that was followed by the last big party that we had. It took me 45 hours to get home because the flight was delayed and I missed my connection, and then they sent me to some godforsaken corner of the U.S. and
Florida.
I missed another connection, and then they sent me to London and then to another in the Arab Emirates to catch another flight. It took me 45 hours, so that's like quadruple points,
Oh
Johnny.
my God. So, okay, all right, Vered. Just serious question. At any point on your journey home, were you like, I hate these guys? Were you ever just like done?
Oh, are you? No, you know what?
No,
It
it's
was
like
awesome.
Stockholm syndrome.
No. It was seriously, it was so awesome because the whole flight home, I was thinking of all these ideas and processing the 5 days or 4 days we were together. So by the time I got home, I was like, okay, I'm actually home now. But if I'd gone straight home after 24 hours, I think I would have been like, no way, this is not working for me. I have to go back. Another flight back to Austin.
Yeah, so I always think it's amazing that not only has Vered come several times, it's always with purpose. It's never been, she's just not a navel gazer. She's always there with, I don't know if I've ever seen her take notes, but she's clearly soaking it all in, asking a lot of questions, and she must be taking notes on some sort of a checklist because she always comes back the next time with everything done. And then it's like, what else can I do? What else can I add to my list? She's just one of those people you really want to be around because, I mean, first of all, Vered is a riot. She always makes us laugh a lot, and she laughs at our jokes, so there's reciprocity there. It's really nice. And she loves to eat, but she also has really great... It is true. She's a totally fun person to eat with. She's not like, oh no, I'm watching what I eat. I mean, she's watching what she eats as it goes into her mouth over and over.
Every time I eat a hamburger, I think of you, Sean.
Well, I'm glad. It's a lot of fun. But more than anything, Vered always asks very intelligent questions. She's somebody who understands that to get the most out of this artistic career, you've got to have fun. She clearly is always having fun with it, but she also has very specific business goals for herself too. Well, actually, let's spend a moment there.
It's almost like she doesn't even need to be here.
I don't.
That's really
Well,
interesting.
now. Thanks, guys. It was fun.
So,
Virid and Dave don't need to be here. Sean will speak for both
I
of them.
could have slept, you mean?
you could have. Vera, tell us a little bit about your day job before writing, because that in and of itself is interesting.
Okay. So I'm an engineer by background, civil engineer, and I have environmental management, master's in environmental management. And I worked at the UN for about almost 10 years, doing different things. Are you falling asleep on me, Johnny? I'm watching you.
No. I'm listening.
You know what? Johnny made cheese today. He's already made cheese. Can we take a moment to talk about
No. We don't need to do that. That's secret. That's proprietary.
Okay, then we won't talk about making cheese, which, since you're not going to explain it, sounds way dirtier than it actually is.
Oh, yeah. Johnny makes lots of cheese, guys.
A couple days in a row he's been making cheese, I hear. All right, so what are some of the things that you what are some of the things that you have done with or at the UN?
Okay, so I worked for the transport unit, and we helped countries. I worked with governments to help them go to clean fuels and vehicles. So one of the highlights of my 10 years working there was actually a trip to North Korea, which I took during the last leader's reign. And that was just fascinating because you basically arrive at the airport, they confiscate anything that might allow you to communicate with the outside world, and then they
like Florida.
assign you a like anything, like cheese. No, not like
wait,
phones.
like a babysitter. So you mean like one babysitter per person?
Yeah. Well, there's not. Okay, let's be clear. There's not a lot of people going into North Korea.
Okay, yeah.
I was myself, and then like the rest of the plane, the small plane that they had once a week, was full of Chinese or North Koreans. Like that was it. I was like the one non-Chinese, non-North Korean person on that plane. So when I landed on the airport, I got full meal treatment. I'm like, oh, madam, welcome to North Korea. Do you have a phone with you? Here's your babysitter.
Wow,
And then you told them that you were from Kenya, and they were like, no, I'm not falling for that bullshit. You do not look Kenyan.
What did they?
Exactly.
What do they call the babysitter? Is it an escort or is it a guide? What do they?
The escort. Well, that would be fun, but no, it was a minder. And
Wow.
he stayed with me. Yeah, no, it was no joke. I couldn't leave the hotel without him. Like literally, even leaving my bedroom.
Like the American Express card.
Completely, don't leave it without it.
Wow. So what was
Or
that
you
like?
die.
Did he speak English? Were you conversant at all?
Yeah, no, he spoke. Actually, the level of English was shockingly good. They still use English textbooks for some reason in some of their schools. So it was really those trippy
Because they're
sensations.
taking over.
In this incredibly isolated country. David, you would have loved it. You would have loved having someone always following you and watching everything you did. Like that would.
What's going on already?
I have a minder right at the
Wow.
door.
Was the minder male?
Yeah, he was male.
So he would just wait outside like the bathroom, but you had moments to yourself, I imagine, right?
No, when I was in my hotel bedroom, I was fine. But as soon as I
I'm
got
sure there
out-
were no cameras there.
Oh no, there probably was for sure.
Yeah, that's Dave's sarcasm. In case.
Did you ever think about sneaking out of a window, walking around behind him, tapping him on the shoulder, and going, "Ha"?
Putting a
Oh,
banana
yeah,
in his
no,
tailpipe.
Yeah, but it was fascinating. It was a trippy experience. I mean, I wrote a whole thing about it. It was just like, I can't believe I actually did that, and then left and didn't get arrested or anything like that. So that was fun.
So what was the goal when you? I mean, the professional goal, and then did you have a personal goal? Were you already writing? Were you trying to because I imagine now as you travel with anybody who writes, you're just kind of collecting stories constantly, right? So was this
I
at
always found that fun. Like from the time I was a kid, whenever my parents took us traveling, I would always be writing poems or short stories about what I was experiencing. So that is never, that's nothing new for me. So yeah, definitely I was writing all the things I was experiencing when I was in North Korea. I went to Tajikistan, different places around Asia and Africa. And so I've always been writing something. But I think in terms of writing as a career, as thinking about it, like this is what I want to actually do with my life, with my day job, that's been more recent, maybe like the past 6 years that I've really kind of thought about, maybe that's something I really should focus on more.
Have you always traveled? Like, did you travel a lot growing up?
Yeah, we always did.
So what's
like the opposite of my life.
Oh, I don't think it's just about travel. I think probably if there was a spectrum, there'd be Dave here and Virid here on everything, maybe. You know, that would actually be a really
I was actually just going to ask what Dave thought of Virid's energy when he first met her.
It's like my son. It's like,
maybe Virid is your son. Have you considered that?
He just straight up told you he didn't want to be around you.
no.
Well, Sean and I had hung out with her a few times. The very first, I'm not thinking very well today, so this story may have already been told. But the first signature session, it was me and Sean and like 3 other people, and Virid was one of them. So.
I remember that. That was the episode that I thought, are these guys gay?
We're just very used to each other.
We were finishing each other's sentences a lot that
because they were in a bathtub together.
There may be truth to that. So, well, now, damn it, I'm going to say. Although we joke about having a show with Dave and Tucker, you know, going visit different restaurants. But I think that a show with Virid and Dave just living life, like, I mean,
in a plane for 45 hours.
It'd be like live with Regis and Kelly, but it'd be like life with Virid and Dave.
Yes, I think that would be really, really good. I do. Okay, so what about when you went from look, I have this professional career and I want to start writing professionally. So what was that journey like? And did you just start out where I'm going to dabble, because you've gone from dabbling to kind of totally going all in. So was that always your intention, or was it just like, I want to play a little part-time at first?
I think it's been a process, Sean. And I remember that first signature event when I was with you guys and those 3 other people. That was actually really that was a signature moment for me, haha. But it was a kind of a turning point for me, because I had been going through this process up until then. And when part of me knew I had to leave the UN, and I kind of knew it, but I didn't want to admit it, because I put a lot of pride in my professional life and my career and whatever, and saying you work at the UN kind of gets people going, oh, that's really cool. And when you say you're a writer, they kind of go, oh, I'm so sorry, you know.
You couldn't find a real job, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, if you say you're a writer, they assume you ate beans last night.
Or you have like an English degree that you didn't know what to do with it, right? So there was a lot of kind of pride and ego kind of tied up with a career that I spent quite a long time building up as well. And I enjoyed aspects of it, but there was a point, and it was actually right before the signature event. I was traveling with my family, and I just knew, like, at a gut level, I can't go back. Like, I can't keep doing this. I feel actually ill thinking about going back to that office. Like, it was a visceral feeling, like a physical sensation. And so when I came to that signature event, and you had asked what was like the rose, the flower, the bud, the thorn, whatever it was, that phrase. I'm like, okay, I'm putting it out there. This is it. And you were the first people I actually told this to. So it was kind of a trippy moment. And so that was a turning point for me in terms of knowing that I was going to move towards a place where this was going to be my full-time career. And I'm still not there yet, but the process is constantly moving onward and accelerating. So I kind of feel like I'm getting there.
Well, that's really cool too, because something else that I've always noticed about you is you're very honest, not just with the people that you're talking to, but with yourself. Like, it's clear that you have a lot of conversations with yourself. You know.
Well, that doesn't sound crazy. Dave has those conversations too. They're really angry and they never agree.
They're not to myself. They're to the voice.
But I do know that you do talk to yourself. You are fluent in what you think. So when you present an idea, there's this understanding, even if it's just happening out loud, because I've seen you do that too. You start thinking and you're pretty confident that you're going to get to where you're getting by the end of the sentence, which I've done that too, right? Like, I don't know exactly where this is going.
That's always a tightrope act, because I always win, but there are times when I'm like, what word should I put here? Oh yeah, that's right. And then the sentence somehow makes sense. It's great.
Yes.
Life without a net.
And I know that you're doing that, but it's because you are you're just really fluent in your own life philosophy, and so you'll even course correct in like the middle of a thought where it's going one way and then it goes somewhere else, and it's because you're connecting dots in your head. But I think for anyone listening, that ability is so important, to know who you are and what you want, so that when you're working things out, it's not in a vacuum and you're not going over these old patterns. I want this thing because I wanted this thing 10 years ago. And it's so easy to want the things that you wanted 10 years ago because you really, really wanted them, right? And so you got to look and I mean, think about how many people are listening to this right now who have been publishing in one way or another over and over, but not really getting the same results. And they're not really questioning why they started or what they're getting out of it or what they hope to get or what it's going to take for them to actually define success or failure. Because the criteria you start when you first started out, like I imagine as you were going from, you know, all of your time with the UN to a little bit of time dabbling really with writing, to completely reversing that ratio to where, from everything I understand lately, you're kind of more dabbling with the UN.
I left the UN completely. No, the UN is like gone. Like that's, and I can't go back there. That's like finished.
So are you just dabbling with like consulting then, like one-off jobs?
So I have a client who's, and it's so interesting because I started off like, this is going to be very part-time, and then they kept saying, oh, but can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this for us? And then I think I wrote you a little while ago. I'm like, okay, I have to actually pull back now because they keep asking me to do more work, and I'm not thinking when I say yes, that for every yes you say, you're saying no to something else. And what I'm saying no to is having the time and the energy to do what I need to do, which is the creative work, right? So I had this amazing conversation with my manager a few days ago, and it's just like, I'm just like, look, this is where I'm at. This is what I can do for you. And this is where I have to draw the line. And she's like, yeah, that's totally cool. We want you to be happy. Tell us what you really enjoy. And I'm like, well, I love doing trainings. So they're going to make me kind of do more of the training side, which I love doing. And then free me up from the admin and the other project management work that really sucks me out. Like, even if it's only a few hours a day, by the end of it, I'm like, oh, I can't do anything after that. Like, it's just soul sucking. So it was a really awesome conversation. But I think, you know, back to your point about being honest with yourself and knowing what you want. Sometimes you don't always know what you want, but being okay with saying, I don't know 100% what I want, but I'm going to keep looking for it until I find what it is. And sometimes if that's something that's totally different from what you've invested a lot of time and energy and money into, it's okay to let that go. Like, I think of Johnny, how he had, like, he was doing his PhD in whatever he was doing it in. And they said,
Genetics.
well, actually, this isn't for me. And he kind of like walked away from it, right? I kind of feel like I did that with my engineering. I mean, it was like 20 years of study and master's degree and UN work and all of this like amazing work. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to walk away now.
Well, yeah, but I think that we're lucky because, I mean, I don't know if you came away with like student loans and stuff like that, but I always think about doctors. Like, I was actually getting paid. It wasn't a lot. It was 13 grand a year on my fellowship in grad school. But like, I was walking away from a technically paid job. So, okay. I just always think like, you know, we know several doctors and lawyers who had to pay like beaucoup bucks for like these big professional schools. And I imagine that's a lot harder to walk away from. I mean,
yeah, because you have sunk costs then in both money and like.
But it's not just time. It's not just, and you're right. In psychological, like there's a lot of cachet. Like, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer.
Yes, and you also probably have most doctors or lawyers, you know, or any high level profession like that. You probably have your parents behind you too, or like we've sunk all.
Yeah,
our
my
money.
parents didn't care, which is nice.
Yeah, like I told my parents that I dropped out of high school, and they were like, "Okay, we're sure you'll figure it out." Like, that was pretty.
I tried to drop out of the science thing when I was an undergrad. I was like, "Yeah, I don't know if this is really working anymore." My mom encouraged me to stick around. Like, I don't begrudge that at all, but it's just like, man, I thought of it earlier.
John's parents pushed him out of an airplane without a parachute and said, "Oh, we're sure you'll figure this out."
Yeah.
So.
Total random comment about being pushed out of an airplane. But this is something also that I think, you know, sometimes people put so much energy into like, oh, I have to go to the best school and whatever loans I have to pay, whatever. But honestly, I see people, like, I went to a very, like, I didn't go to the most amazing university, okay, but for my undergrad, it was good, but at that time it wasn't amazing. And I ended up getting jobs right from graduation, because it was about myself and not the degree that people cared about. And I graduated without any debt, because I didn't go to the top level school. And I think that's also a decision that you can make.
It's
You don't
so
have
much more important than people like. They don't care about that nearly as much as they care about.
I was first in my class in high school, and I had teachers who were like, "You're going to Ohio State? Like, why would you waste?" And I'm like, "Fuck, I'm really, really glad I didn't try to go for something highfalutin and rack up a bunch of debt."
Yeah, it's such a bad way to spend money. But anyway, I think what you see here is that the more you start doing stuff that you love doing, the more you realize, oh, I am not really into that other stuff. And so your ratio has to change. And so if your goal when you started was, look, okay, we've actually never talked about this exact progression, but knowing you, I imagine you were just trying to amuse yourself, really, at first. I wonder if I could do this. It'd be fun to tell myself this story. I don't care if anybody reads it. Like, your objective, I'm sure, on that first book, and correct me if I'm wrong, was not, I'm going to be a full-time author. It was, I kind of want to see if I can do this.
Yeah, completely. Like, it was a story. It was like fun. And I'm like, oh, let me just do this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I didn't even have a website. Like, I kind of had this book and I'm like, oh, now I've written this. Great. What do I do with it? Like, typical, right?
Right. Well, of course. But then you're doing that and you're like, wow, how come I've been feeling kind of miserable some of the time, and yet I'm not feeling miserable at all when I'm doing this other thing. And so you want to start doing that thing more and more and more and more. And the more you do it, the more the other stuff, like you feel that dissonance, that contrast. And so you lean harder into the one. So do you remember the moment?
Yeah.
Do you remember the
thing is, someone told me, like around when I just first started at the UN, someone actually told me, Vered, you have to choose the path of creativity in the arts, because you could create all day long and never get tired, always be happy, and this other thing isn't going to serve you. And I kind of went, yeah, I'll just write on the side. And 10 years later, I'm like, damn, she was right. Why didn't I listen to her?
So do you feel like, because that's true, and I've never seen you in a professional context. Like, I've seen you relax sitting around a table, either to share information or food, which are like my two favorite ways to like sit next to people. So that's always worked out. I've always seen you really buoyant, really happy. But is that, I imagine that's just who you are. I imagine that's who you are around your family. I imagine that's who you are at work. But is that not quite true? Are you a lot happier when you're creating than when you're having to be in a different mode?
I think generally speaking, I am a happy person. Like, I kind of feel that's my purpose. As joyful as I can. But in terms of, like, if I'm I know when I'm on the right path, and that's basically, for me, that's the creative path. I know when I am where I'm supposed to be, when the joy comes very naturally and I feel energized by whatever I'm doing. So when I was doing this other work, like UN work or project management work for my current client, I actually could feel it took a lot more energy to keep myself going. And I have to sometimes actually force myself to do the work. And that doesn't feel right. Like, I shouldn't have to force myself to do work. Like, it should just come naturally. Like, for me, anything to do with writing, like even writing an email to my newsletter, I'm like, oh yeah, it's awesome, let me do it. Like, checking my stats, that's great. Like, writing a draft, awesome. Like, there's no sense of I'm working. It's kind of a sense of like, oh, I'm just having fun and playing and creating, and oh, hey, look, some people are buying my books, that's awesome. So I think it's about what happens to me at the end of the day, that how I feel energetically, that makes me realize, okay, maybe this isn't my happiest space if I'm doing this work, while this other stuff makes me feel really energized. Like the training work I was mentioning, so I do training for fleet managers, which is totally different from writing and whatever, but it's like in short bursts, like it's 3 days, once every couple of months, and it just energizes me in the right way without draining me. So I kind of go into that, and it gives me a new perspective on life. I meet some really interesting people, and then I finish and I walk off and go back to my writing. So that works with what I'm doing with my life. But the admin, the project management, I'm sure a lot of people can feel this, like when they're actually having to like, they're almost like bashing their head against a screen and they're having to force themselves to do the work. Like that sucks. So that's kind of, I think I finally reached a point in my life where I'm able to embrace that reality and not feel that I owe anyone an explanation for why I'm turning my back on what most people see as like, oh, that's an amazing career and people are actually offering you work. Like I never have to apply for jobs. People apply work to me, like, and I'm walking away from that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with that now.
Have you ever felt anything, has there ever been a gig or a job that you walked away from and regretted walking away from that?
Never.
Yeah, I heard something recently that I just kind of looked up just on the fly right now. And there's apparently a lot of evidence that there's, 100 million neurons in your gut that comprise your second brain. Like say psychology today, I call it your second brain. And so many of us are used to thinking that only intellectual decisions that occur above the neck are sort of worthy of like, okay, well, logically I can realize that is something that I should do. But the neurons in your gut are more than are in your spinal cord. So it's actually like listening to your gut is actually a real thing. And so I think that this is an interesting discussion for that reason. It's usually right.
Yeah, and I listen to it way more than I used to. I used to listen to it, but not really trust it, and certainly not.
You'd vet it. You'd be like, I'm going to pass this up to the brain for approval.
Yeah, but I realize now the brain's actually kind of a dick a lot of times.
Right, it overthinks. The gut is usually right.
Right, because it's just more animal, and
I think it wants donuts.
I think it's different. I think it just depends on like how much practice you have. I think the more you lean into your instincts, the better your instincts get. But otherwise, they kind of atrophy a little. Vera, do you feel like your instincts are sharper now than they were 10 years ago?
Oh, 100%. And I trust myself more. Like, and a friend of my cousin actually, she told me, leave the UN. If you want to go back, they will take you back. You're the type of person who can always get jobs if she wants to. So go do what you want to do. And I'm like, you know what? That's kind of really good advice. And so because I haven't applied for a job in probably 15 years or more. And yet I always have work. So I had to realize that what I was clinging to was not the fear of losing a job or not having a job. I was clinging to this like an ego-based decision or like the brain decision. Like the brain's like, oh, well, you've invested all this time and money, you should do this. And I was like, no, actually, I really don't. So I do agree with following that gut instinct. And it's like a muscle. When you practice it, it definitely gets stronger. And in the creative arts, which is what we are all in, we're all writers. If we are able to practice following that intuitive instinct, it actually will help us on many different levels, not just in terms of, do I take this job or not, but also in terms of our writing. Like instinctually, we will know, okay, where should the story go? What should this character do? Or even in terms of, how do I interact with my audience? Or how do I want to present myself to the world? What kind of branding do I want? Like, I think when you start playing with that, it doesn't mean you'll always make the right decisions, but it's the muscle that you're exercising. And eventually the more you do it, the more fine-tuned it's going to get. And then you're going to find out how you want to show up in the world in this field of creativity in the arts and writing, and you'll become better at it. So I definitely think it's something that everyone needs to consider, especially when they're working in creative spaces.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say that at least I don't think this is necessarily universally true, but for me, I found that the gut is, if you want to listen to your gut, you'll probably be happier. Your brain will make you safer. Your brain is definitely more focused on your safety and just keeping you, I don't know, not even in balance, but like not on the street. But your gut doesn't really care about that as much. Your gut is, how centered do you feel as a human? Or my gut is definitely more concerned with my happiness, and my brain is more concerned with my security. So I've learned to balance those two things a lot more than I used to, where it was a little more one or the other. I would find myself really listening to my gut in some situations and some really listening to my head in others. But now I understand more how they work together.
Sure. And also I think we need to recognize that sometimes the way our brain thinks is very much based on the socializing that we receive. And so even like you were saying, our brain is there to protect us and keep us safe. But safe by what definition? You can as easily fail in a job you hate has fail in something that you really want to do and you're passionate about. So why not go with the passion and see where it takes you, and not to be stupid about it. I mean, of course you have debts, you have kids, whatever, but sometimes I think we overestimate how safe our brains can actually help us become. And that safety is a bit of a mirage. It's an illusion. And it's something that I think living in Kenya, I see it maybe more acutely than, because when I go to the US and Canada, honestly, I feel like I'm in Disneyland. Like the whole continent is Disneyland. The way people think, the way people behave. And I don't mean this as a criticism. I'm just saying like it's wonderful.
It's okay. It can be a criticism.
It's kind of like my husband and I were looking at each other going, oh my God, this place is so like, it's almost trippy for us. It's like, is this real? Is this for real? Everything is like, it's so sanitized. And
you've been to Walmart?
Yeah, I have.
So let's talk about your niche, because speaking of Kenya, I mean, it's really interesting. So historical Kenya, I mean, can you talk a little bit about what you chose to write about?
Yeah, well, I have two different series. So my first series that I wrote up, which you're referencing, is based in historical Kenya in colonial Nairobi, right at the time when it was a construction camp for the British Railway. And so my whole story for that, series is based in the 1900s, like the turn, like 1900 to 1905. So it's got this sort of Victorian steampunk element to it, as well as kind of African Kenyan colonial history element as well, which try to market that. It's really a challenge.
Well, yeah, you have this like double-edged sword where that's a pretty small pool, but you've got everyone there just wants to jump in because there's no other stuff. So why did you pick that genre? Was it because it was your landscape, like you could just draw from, or was it just a huge interest point?
A bit of both. I've been writing for a while and writing in other spaces and stories. And I finally reached a point where I'm like, I'm ready to write about my home, Nairobi. And I hadn't felt confident to do that before. And then—
What was keeping you from confident? Your brain, not your gut?
Yeah, probably my brain. Oh, actually both. Because I think I was writing what I wanted to write before. It wasn't like I was overthinking it. But then I kind of reached a place when I'm like, I actually can write about this place. And it's what I know best now. I mean, I've lived here since mid-2000, so it's like 19 years now. This is the place I actually call home. I know it better than the place I grew up in. So I decided to write about Kenya, and history has always fascinated me. And the paranormal has always been a part of all my books. So that kind of all coalesced together in this messy, mixed genre storyline that definitely attracts some very strong fans. But it is difficult to market as, and that's something you pointed out. The first time we met, you're like, wow, that's really niche. And that's actually why I ended up writing a series set in modern Nairobi, but it's still based in the same world. It has some of the same characters and the same laws and history and whatever. So it actually has made me able to write this new modern series that has a really strong history. Like there's a real sense of a world already created because it was already created. And so that's kind of been fun that way. And it's a bit more genre focused. Like it's much more commercial genre rather than, oh, let me write this mixed genre that no one will understand.
Well, it's okay. So I want to stick there for just a second, because that was the big thing that we wanted to untangle the first time we talked, which is, okay, how do you expand this so that you can spend the same amount of time writing books, but get 3, 4, 5 times the amount of readers, right? Without changing a lot of stuff. Did you find, because I mean, for us, we've always found that fences are not a big deal. And in fact, they make projects more fun, and it's not anything that impedes us. Did you find that having to put more rules to your art impeded your art, or did it actually make it go faster?
Oh, it made it go way faster. And it was so much fun to do. And I was writing in it's urban fantasy with a strong paranormal romance element. And so I had studied the tropes, and it was really like the books are fairly tropey without being too cliche, but it was so much fun to write. And I was able to weave in a lot of the world I'd already created without breaking the genre, so to speak. So it was a great challenge that way, and it flowed really, really well. So I was super happy with the way that all worked out.
All right, I don't want to, you can just tell me to shut up, because I'm going to put you on a spot a tiny bit here. But you told a story the last time you were in Austin that did make you tear up a little bit. And I thought it was a really great story and a really powerful story. And would you mind telling that story? Because I think it was just a wonderful story.
Sure. That was about my father-in-law, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Yeah. So I had shared a story. So my father-in-law passed away just over a year ago. And so what was really fascinating, so he was a very special man, and I always knew that. But I shared the story because, okay, let me give the context. We were at the signature event, and I was listening to some of the people talk, and they were really hard on themselves, like, oh, I'm not spending enough time writing, or I didn't get my 5,000 words a day written out, or whatever it was, or I'm not a good mom because of whatever. So I shared the story. So my father-in-law passed away over a year ago, and we had the funeral and then a memorial service. And all of these people, like once the formal funeral was done and they were invited to come and share stories, all of these people, a lineup of people kept coming and sharing most amazing stories about my father-in-law that some of them we had never heard of these stories. And then at the memorial service, the same thing happened. And what really struck me was how no one talked about the amazing business person he was. And he started successful businesses on 3 different continents, in Iran, in Kenya, and in Canada. And they were all very successful, employed lots of people, made, reasonably good money. No one mentioned that. Like, no one mentioned any of his financial and business successes. They mentioned how he helped them, when a child was sick, or he counseled them when they were having some problems, or he guided them along the path that they later found out was really good for them, or he made them feel good. Like, they talked about how he made them feel and how much he was there to support them and love them and encourage them. And that's what people shared. And I always think that although we talk about the big picture in terms of our writing career, there's also this bigger picture, which is really, where does the writing fit in what is our life, right? And for me, what I was trying to share with everyone else was, don't get too caught up in the fact that you didn't meet a specific goal today or tomorrow, or maybe this season is not a season where you can put in the work. Maybe this is the season where you have to say, you know what, I have a baby at home and that's what I have to focus on, and I'll write whenever I can, and it won't be a lot, and that's okay, because that season will change. The child will get a bit older, go to day school, whatever, and I'll have more time. Seasons we always encounter seasons, whether it's a bad health issue or a young child or whatever it is, and they pass. And then there's a new season where you may have different opportunities and different challenges. And to put those in this bigger context, that you don't get caught up in too much in the goals, although it's good to set goals for yourself, don't get too worn up in them, because that's what people will remember. People remember what you did, how you felt, how they felt around you, how you made them feel, how you encouraged them. And I think that's something that I constantly remind myself, because I'm a very driven person. I'm a bit like, oh, I really want to finish this book. And then my child is, nagging me about something, and I get impatient. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why am I doing any of this anyways? Like, if I'm not there to kind of chill out and hang out with my kid for a few minutes, then there's a problem. So that's the story I shared, and I didn't cry.
Well, it's like goals are, no, you didn't. That was beautiful. I would have never known you cried before. I think it's really great to have goals, but the moment you become slaves to them, like, what's the point? Then it's just taskmaster. It's just another, it's fruit flies. It's whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, I've shared with you a lot of James Clear's articles. Whoever is interested, look up James Clear. He writes the most amazing articles about habit setting and goal setting. And his perspective is that sometimes we get distracted by goals. Like, if I say, for example, I want to write a novel within 2 months, and I've calculated I have to write 1,000 words or 2,000 words a day. That's great, but what's even more important is the habit of showing up and writing every day. Because if you do that, even if one day you don't meet the 2,000 word goal or whatever it is, but you're showing up and doing the work every day, that is going to end up being much more productive than cramming in the words and maybe, like, some days not meeting the habit of showing up, but other days you cram in the words to make up for it. The habit is more important than the goal, whether it's losing weight, writing a book, or whatever it is. It's the habit of doing something that's going to give you the real result, as opposed to some goal. And so he says it much more eloquently than me, but I think that's what I'm also really practicing. And I think, Sean, you actually do this really well, and Johnny, the streak idea of just showing up. And even if you like there's some days I literally can only write like a few hundred words because of other obligations. But every day I show up. So it's like, it's every single day I'm doing something about a book. So I know that eventually, if I do it every day, it will eventually get done. Even if it takes a bit longer than what I expected, it'll be there, it'll get there. So I think
Yeah,
that
you actually really helped me with something specifically in that. It was, you're one of the people who helped me get into dictation, because you were doing it, like you were doing it. And I remember there was one time when you came in and you're like, I'm getting dictation next time you see me, I'm gonna have dictation nailed. And then I thought, you know what, I'm gonna have dictation nailed too. And then I saw you like 6 months later, you flew across an ocean with dictation done, and I still hadn't. And I was like, and I've just been on this for like 8 or 9 years at this point. I'm gonna get dictation. And then when you came back the second time, you were so practical about it. And the one phrase that you said that really stuck with me when I could no longer make excuses for myself was, some days it's the only writing I get in, but 10 minutes of dictation, when you're focused, can get a lot of words in. And you're absolutely right. There's been days when like, okay, I just got my 10 minutes of dictation, but you know, those are legit words. And as of now, I think I've got like, let me see, 211 days I've been dictating as a streak. And Johnny's seen me, we'll travel, and I'm like, yeah, I got to go walk around Koreatown for 20 minutes. I'm going to dictate a little bit. But
try that in North Koreatown.
yeah, hello.
But that habit is there for sure. And I have a couple extra books in that 211 days that are written exclusively from dictation. So yeah, thank you. I mean, I know that we've impacted you, but you've impacted us right back. So yeah.
I love the idea of small habits, of making small changes and making those into habits. Because sometimes we think, oh, I have to do something really big. Like with dictation, I was the same way. I'm like, oh, it has to be all out. And I was like, actually, I can just do a few minutes a day until I get used to it. So for dictation, I started off just dictating emails, because that's like really simple words. I'm not trying to create a story. I'm giving a message to someone. And I just practiced dictation in those small little ways until it became more natural. And then I did, okay, let me try a short story. Let me try writing a blurb. Let me do this. So I think it's about just not expecting ourselves to be 100% full on to where we want to be, but rather see, okay, what are the steps I need to get there? And then just make them even smaller. Because if we give ourselves a small step to take, we can do it. If we tell ourselves, oh, we have to do dictate a whole book in the next 1 week or whatever it is, it's going to be like, dang, that's stressful. Like, I don't know how to dictate. Then you fail, and then you feel bad about it.
That's a really great point, because the number one thing I walked away from our last dictation conversation with, before I went and tackled it myself, was that you weren't trying to get words in, you were trying to feel comfortable with the process. And that was it. That was one of those conversations where I really realized, oh, this is just a muscle. It's just a habit. And the reason I'm not doing it well is because I don't want to do it. So if I can change because I want the result. I want to be able to say, I went for a walk and came back with a few thousand words. That's kind of magical. But I had to want more than the result. I had to actually want to enjoy the process, or it was never going to happen for me. Because when else in my life have I said, I want a result, but I don't really care if I'm miserable during the process? Never, not once, never happened. So dictation wasn't going to be any different. I know it's like 11 o'clock or whatever for you. So let's close with what is something like the biggest surprise that you've had in going from a very professional life to a colorfully professional life as an artist. And what's the
colorfully professional? What a euphemism.
And what's the one thing that you would have done differently if you could go back and give yourself advice from maybe 5 years ago?
Started this sooner. Kind of given up on trying to be a grown-up and just done what I wanted to do. No, I think no, to take myself more seriously. And I think that's something that I wasn't doing as a writer, as an artist. I wasn't
giving yourself more credit for your ability?
No, I mean, the ability part was not the issue. It's, for example, like I would give, 8 hours a day to a job that I wasn't 100% like enthusiastic about, but that I'm a professional, so I'm going to do that. But I wasn't doing that with the stuff that I was really passionate about. Like I wasn't taking, this is something that I'm supposed to do. I'm meant to do this. I like everything about me is this, not this other professional life, this so-called professional life. And I wasn't willing to accept that about myself because, as I said, it's just like, like you're sitting at the dinner table. Oh, what do you do, Barrett? Oh, I'm a writer, as opposed to I work at the UN and I help governments save the world, sort of thing, right? So I wasn't taking myself.
Start telling people you write $5 SEO articles. That people are really impressed by that.
I got impressed. The in-laws did it. Yeah, so I think that's the big thing, like just being okay with not fitting in with the current norm of success, which in my world is like, oh yeah, you had a professional position at the UN and this was an amazing thing, and now you've kind of turned away from that and you're doing something totally different. I'm like, and I'm okay with that. Like I'm actually okay with that story, with that conversation. Like I'm actually, because I've owned it, and it feel like whenever I think about it, it just resonates with me. Like there's an energy there that doesn't exist in any other sphere of my life, almost in terms of work, at least, right? So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, Vered. It's always wonderful to talk to you. We'll let you get to sleep. You with your tea. It's really.
Is that tea to help you go to sleep as soon as you're off, or tea to keep you awake while you have?
Or is it caffeinated tea that's going to keep you awake?
Yeah, this is herbal. Don't worry. But now I'm too psyched to go to sleep, so I'll go and read instead. But it's okay.
There you go.
Great talking.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Vered, for being on. If you guys want to join our live show, and you should, because it's a party and there are not enough people here live, and that would be good. Go to sterlingandstone.net/live show. We will broadcast at 3 p.m. Central Time most Fridays. Some Fridays we are off. Today was 2 o'clock, but that doesn't matter because this is the last one. So 3 p.m. Central Time. So anyway, sterlingandstone.net/live show, and we'll send you reminder emails when there's live shows.
And also, next show, Dave, you need to shut the fuck up. You're monopolizing every conversation, and it's just like, people are like, okay, we wanted more Dave, but this is ridiculous.
I would try to tamper it down a little for the next one.
He's trying to slowly exit the company, and we're just going to realize, like, one day we're going to like, wait a minute, wasn't there a guy with a beard and he was angry? And I seem to remember that. He's like slowly stepping out of frame.
Our stories wouldn't be nearly as good without Dave. We all know that.
I scared him with my North Korea story. Now he's like, oh my God, maybe they're out there waiting to get me.
Well,
maybe. He's not, there's no maybe in that assessment.
I think at this point, he thinks that you are now being under constant surveillance, which has now put him under constant surveillance. And really, he's pissed at Johnny and I for bringing you into our lives.
I mean, next thing you know, you'll have hummus. All right. So thanks, everybody, for listening to the Story Studio podcast. We will see you next time.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Bye.